welcome back here to Viewpoints. I'm your host, Jordan Voyles. I'm sitting here with Dr. John Gerlach. We have started a new sermon series. Today we're going to be talking about Psalms 1. So, John, what do you have for us today?
Yeah, I'm excited about the summer where we're going to dive into several of the Psalms. And I think Psalms are amazing to me. I like what Spurgeon said about the Psalms, that they were the treasury of David. There was so much treasure there, is the idea. There's so much just valuable wisdom and help. And it's written by a lot of song leaders, which is a little scary, but they're,
I trust them.
Yeah. Who would think that the Bible would have that? But, so it's interesting because they very much tell about emotions, very much about feelings, very much about how to deal, struggles. I mean, a lot of struggles are played out in the Psalms, where someone very much pouring your heart out to God is, I would say, one of the themes of the Psalms. So you have David, who wrote most of them, but the other were song leaders in Jerusalem. Yeah. So there's a number of different people that were song leaders. So, what do you think of those as songs? I mean, those, like, they sang these Psalms.
Absolutely. It's a cool book. I mean, especially like you said, for worship leaders to look back to, a misconception is all the Psalms were written by David. That's not true.
Yeah.
There's several. There's Asaph, there's songs, Solomon, So it's really cool to really dive in, like you said, like the treasury of, like, wow. Again, you could be reading these too, and it's like, man, is David like bipolar? Like, there's so many like different Psalms, and as a media team and the worship team, we're going through the Psalms as well. So it's really, really neat to dive into to what each Psalm says and how you can relate that to your own life when you're walking. So love the Psalms.
Yeah. Well, I want to give a challenge before we kind of dive into our first Psalm that we've talked about. And the challenge is, I'm doing a couple things. I just want to challenge everybody to really use the summer. This is a great time. Use June and July and just dive into the Psalms. I'm going through that. I didn't know y'all were doing that, but I'm going through a daily devotional book through the Psalms. And it's taking several Psalms each day, and I'm going through that, and I'm trying to read these several Psalms a day, basically, is what it amounts to. So I encourage everybody, at least do the ones maybe we're doing on Sundays, or just dive into the Psalms, and read them. And it would, too much, it wouldn't be that tough.
You won't regret it.
No, 2 or 3 a day, and you'd make it through all the Psalms. So pretty great, pretty powerful. So let's talk about Psalm 1. Psalm 1 is been described as like the keynote direction of all the other Psalms. It's basically gives us a way that points out there's two paths in life, and everybody's gonna pick one. Everybody's picking one path there. But I thought what was interesting as I dug into it, and it was this whole idea of it starts, blessed is the person. And that word blessed is actually happy. And I mean, I don't know what your take is. I kind of always go, hey, happiness is shallow. Happiness is, it's kind of like you need joy. You don't need, you know what I'm saying? Happiness is based on happenings, all those that's a bunch of preacher quotes right there.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is I checked it this week over again just to dig into it, but it literally means happy. And so you have this path of happiness, and what is the path? And it's right there in Psalm 1. So let me just read the Psalm. It's real short. It's 6 verses. The joys of those who do not follow the advice of the wicked, or stand around with sinners, or join with mockers, but they delight in the law of the Lord, meditating on it day and night. And they're going to be like trees planted along the riverbank, bearing fruit in each season, and their leaves never wither, and they prosper in all they do. But not the wicked. They are like worthless chaff scattered by the wind. They will be condemned at the time of judgment. Sinners will have no place among the godly, for the Lord watches over the path of the godly, but the path of the wicked leads to destruction. So let's talk about, first of all, we got the wicked and the godly. We got the ungodly and the godly. So, what is ungodly? What is ungodly a murderer? Is ungodly, somebody who doesn't go to church, or what is ungodly? I think that's where we got to start, because it's saying that's one path. Then you have the one who is a God-centered life, which is how I would define godly. But let's talk about ungodly.
Yeah.
All right. So what's your take on what are we talking about here?
Yeah.
An ungodly person.
In this context, I think David's talking about there are, like you said, there's those two roads. There's the people that obey the law of God and his precepts, and those who don't. Right. And I think those are who, as David is talking about, these are the people that do not obey the Lord, that are not meditating on his word. They're going to be like, the chaff that's in the wind. Right. And so for me, it's when I look at that, it's like, okay, here are the people that really obey God, and here are people that don't. Right. So those are the ungodly to me.
Yeah, I think it's really that. I think the ungodly is more the thing of someone who's living a self-centered life instead of a God-centered life, and they're just not doing God's plan, God's purpose, God's law. They're just not doing any of that. So you got the two paths there and going on there. But then it says, here's what the Good News translation says: happy are those who reject the advice of evil people, who do not follow the example of sinners, or join those that have no use for God. So let's talk about that part, because it gives kind of three different categories there. Don't walk with these folks, don't stand with these folks, don't sit with these folks. And so it's kind of breaks it down. And I think that's real key, because the whole standing is kind of a commitment, like taking a stand. Walking that's your decisions, your paths. And then sitting is like, this is kind of my attitude of my heart. And I think there's such a key thing here about knowing that that's what God focuses in on. What do we stand for? Who are we sitting with? Yeah. Who are we walking with in our lives? Because that's going to have such a huge, huge impact on us. But it says now, again, this is a path to happy. So so to me, that remind me of the Beatitudes, blessed are, and it has a whole list. So what is the biblical view of happy? If this is the path of happy, what is happy in God's definition of happy? And your thoughts?
Well, if you look at Psalms 1 all the way through 51, I do believe there's a common thread. Right. Which is David you see this word thrown around a lot, the saints. Right. And I think he's, like you said, he's painting that clear picture of like God's people and not God's people. To me, happiness, and for David, and the common thread through those Psalms, is when he's around those people and leading him and guiding him and helping him on his journey. So happiness to me is understanding, like you said, who's at the table with you, who can walk with you, and also it's not, okay, the storms aren't going to come, but when the storms do come, when I'm walking through the valley, I know who my anchor is. That's happiness. Yeah. That's joy of knowing, life's horrible right now, but I have a hope. I have a future hope.
That's good.
And I know who's with me in that fight. But I think it's twofold. I think it's knowing who you belong to, and knowing that the people that you're surrounded by also belong to that same Christ.
Yeah, that's good.
And so, but you do see the common thread through Psalm all the way from 1 to 51 of like the saints of God. These are my people. These are the people that I want to be around, and meditating on the word.
Yeah, that's great. I like that. And then you got the other path, the ungodly path, and it says they're like chaff, which, I don't know. There's only one time I've ever been around chaff. I mean, I don't know that people have even seen it. I mean, we know it's this husk of the wheat and all this stuff, the outer husk. But, I was around it one time, and they were harvesting, and it was just a friend of mine that had a farm, and basically that stuff got everywhere. It was you get covered in it because it's blowing everywhere. Sure. As they're kind of, working the field, and it was annoying. I mean, it's just like, this stuff is just getting everywhere on me, and this sort of thing. You just didn't like it. Right. But it's like this blowing in the wind. And in my devotional today, in Psalm 1, because I'm kind of going through Psalm, and so started as we are starting this series. it had a great statement. And the great statement was that the ungodly path is like getting trapped by the world. And they said, here's two major ways that you get trapped. You go with the crowd, or you go with the world, or you get real cynical.
Interesting.
The kind of the scoffer idea, the mocker idea. And I started thinking, man, that is a real battle for everybody, I think, to, first of all,
You're saying those are the same?
No, that's two effects of kind of the ungodly path is you get trapped into going, well, that's what everybody says around me, so I'm going to go and think that same way, not God's way. But the one that really got my attention was the cynical one, because I think for us as pastors, I think for every Christian, though, there's like one battleground we have is don't get cynical, like especially about people. Don't get cynical about that God can do the impossible. Don't get cynical about, hate dealing with this. And here we go again. And, just get cynical about life. I mean, why should a Christian ever get cynical about life if what you just described about we have an anchor, a hope that is Jesus? Where does cynical come into that? It just doesn't come into it. So your thoughts on.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's one of the scariest verses to me in the Bible is in Matthew when it says that the Lord is waiting to separate, from the wheat from the chaff. And so I was always thinking to myself like, man, I don't want to be in the chaff. I don't want to be in that area of like, God's separating me from the saints. And so that to me is a scary, and it's just so cool how everything kind of lines up with one another. Because here David is saying like, that's the difference. Are you going to be blown away? And that's what the wicked are. That's their end.
Yeah.
That's their future that they have. Yeah. So to me, I when I read verses like that, I always think about Matthew, that the Lord's just waiting with a winnowing fork, waiting to separate.
Yeah.
And so I always try to make for sure, like, in seasons of being cynical, or, what is it? Glass half full, half empty. What would be the cynical? I guess the
pessimistic.
Yeah. I always just try to remember like, gosh, like what side am I on?
All right.
So,
that's good. That's good.
Sir.
Yeah. I think you hit on it earlier. I think just to kind of give the big takeaway here, I think the big takeaway about happiness is delighting in the law of the Lord. And I think you meditate on it, which means you're just going to put it into practice. I mean, meditation biblically is not just, think on it. It means your action. It's coming into your life, into your actions, your attitudes, what you do. And then it's delighting, where it's like, it's not like a duty. It's like, I get to, that God had that for me today.
Yeah.
God spoke to me today here, right there. I needed that. And that's why I want to encourage everybody to just dive into the Psalms this summer. What a great investment. What a great way to delight in the law of the Lord and to make it part of everybody's just heart and life this summer, because what a great investment that would be.
Yeah, I was going to ask you before we end, for the new person, or they don't know anything about the Psalms, or they're coming in, they hear you preach this sermon on Sunday, and obviously we're going to be talking about the Psalms throughout these sermon series. What would be kind of one thing that you would encourage them, or kind of let them know about the Psalms that can kind of help them on their journey in their Christian walk? I mean, what would be one thing that you would tell them, like, this is why you need to know the Psalms and join with us in the sermon series?
I think it's a good example is what happened a couple of weeks ago. I was talking to some people, and they were asking me, can you give us some verses, some scripture with some of these things they were facing, which were real life stuff. And my first thought, without a doubt, was Psalms. Here's Psalm. There's a Psalm. There's a Psalm. There's a Psalm. And as we go through the series, we're going to be answering some different questions about how do I deal with this? How do I deal with that? Loneliness, anger, depression. They're problems we feel like we got just in our time. We're looking at something 3,000 years ago that has answers for us today, because they went through the same stuff. It was just, maybe not, technology was different, but the heart, our human heart, was the same.
That's good.
So I would just encourage people to really make the Psalms your resource
Mm-hmm.
for some of these things, because you will be on a journey with someone who would be with you, but makes it through. They're rough. I mean, some of them are raw.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how else
Mm-hmm.
to say it. It's just raw.
Yeah.
Like, God, I'm mad at you. God, why'd you do this? But I think the big thing I would say about the Psalms is the big lesson of the Psalms is you always take whatever you're dealing with to God.
Yeah.
Don't take it yourself. Don't take it on yourself. But the best place is just take it to God, and even if it's kind of raw.
Yeah.
But always, that's the right thing to always do in every situation.
That's good. Pastor John, thank you so much. The listener, we pray that you stick with us through the series of Psalms. It's going to be a great series. We hope to see you next time, and God bless.